In the year 1930, Subhash Chandra Bose composed a long handwritten letter to the revolutionary leader Barindra Kumar Ghosh, a younger brother of Sri Aurobindo. In it, he set out his belief in class struggle and wrote, "During all these years, we have meant and explained by freedom, political freedom alone. But henceforth, we have to declare that we do not want to liberate people merely from political bondage. We want to liberate them from all forms of bondage. The struggle for independence has as its aim the removal of the triple bondage of political, economic and social oppression. When all shackles are removed, we can proceed to build a new society on the basis of communism. The principal aim of a freedom struggle is to build a free and classless society." These words should come as no surprise. Over the 3 decades of his political life, Bose consistently expressed his faith in socialism, not of the Fabian or Gandhian brand, but based on Marxist theory. The history is written, yet most people learn what the media tells them. Bose is correctly described in the popular media as a liberator of India, a patriot of patriots, a spiritual man, though deadly secular, who put women's empowerment into practice. Yet, the corporate media has little to say on his political philosophy, economic concept, and socialistic thinking. Bose's beliefs are also sidelined by political camps, whether they be the Congress, BJP, or even the CPI. Much of what he articulated remains relevant today. He was apprehensive that nation building after independence would be even more challenging than removing the British. He had stated, "The British Empire is in any case doomed, and the only question is as to what will happen to us when its final dissolution takes place." In his youth, Bose was influenced and inspired by Swami Vivekananda's thoughts and preaching on universalism, nationalism, and social reform and service. Vivekananda had said, "I am a socialist not because it is a perfect system, but because I believe that half a loaf is better than no bread." Swamiji saw socialism as a ray of hope for the myriad problems confronting India. In 1929, addressing the Midnapur Youth Conference, Bose voiced a demand for full socialism. A new society has to be established on basis of a full socialism. Economic disparity is to be removed and everybody, man and woman, is to be given equal opportunity for education and advancement in life. We must see that a sovereign state is established on a socialist basis. Again, in March of 1931, addressing the All India Naujawan Bharat Sabha in Karachi, he said, "Friends and comrades, I want to see the establishment of a socialist republic in India." Political emancipation had to go hand in hand with economic freedom. Bose said, "The right to work and sufficient wages for sustenance must be ensured for all. There will be no place in society for the idle, and everybody must enjoy equal opportunity. Above all, distribution of wealth and income must be equal and just for all. Hence, it is imperative that the state must be responsible for production as well as distribution." He clearly visualized India's destiny as carrying forward revolutionary history. In 1933, at the Third Indian Political Conference in London, he tied each modern century to a singular revolutionary contribution in thought. The 17th century had British constitutional democracy. The 18th century had French liberty, equality and fraternity. Bose continued, "During the 19th century, Germany made the most remarkable gift through her Marxian philosophy. During the 20th century, Russia had enriched the culture and civilization of the world through her achievement in proletarian revolution. The next remarkable contribution to the culture and the civilization of the world, India will be called upon to make. Further, he said, we know, for example, that in Soviet Russia, a new scheme of national or political economy has been evolved in keeping with facts and conditions of the land. The same thing will happen to India. In solving our economic problems, Pigou or Marshall will not be of much help. At this period, right until 1937, Bose was in prison or in virtual exile. On his return, at the Haripura Congress session in 1938, he advocated radical land reforms, abolishing landlordism and rapid industrialization under state ownership and control. The aim, he said, was gradually socializing our entire agricultural and industrial system in the spheres of both production and distribution. Subhas Bose was strongly against the capitalist structure of economy and was a strong votary of socialism and advocated the peasants and the oppressed to liberate themselves from the capitalist shackles. He studied the functioning of the Soviet, German and Italian governments and had identified some similarities between communism and fascism. Supremacy of the state over the individual, party rule as a principle of governance, and planned industrial reconstruction of the economy. But soon he noticed the devil in fascism. In an interview with Rajanipam Dutt, leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, in January 1938, Bose admitted that the commonality between communism and fascism was not a happy one. The naked nature of aggressive nationalism practiced by the fascists is to be condemned because it is anti-people, anti-democratic and anti-human, he said. In his speech at the reception meeting in his honour at Pancras Town Hall, London, on January 11, 1938, Bose said that India would struggle for freedom, democracy and socialism as part of a worldwide struggle for these ideals. He made a clear distinction between majority rule and democracy, which is quite relevant even today. Bose clearly outlined, when imperialism is ended, the socialist phase of a movement will commence. Those who win power must undertake the task of post-struggle reconstruction. The Forward Bloc was created in 1939 not to break away from the Congress but to consolidate the leftist forces within the party and win over the majority of their viewpoint. The aim was to continue the national struggle in the name and with the united strength of the Congress. Creation of Forward Bloc was a culmination of Subhash Chandra Bose's thoughts. He wrote, it was a historical and dialectical necessity. For obvious reasons, Bose's obstacle was the rightist wing, representing the big landlords and business houses within the Congress, who lived comfortably during the Raj rule, advocating the negotiation path, and were opposed to full-fledged struggle against the British. While explaining in his editorial Why Forward Bloc on 5th August 1939, he elaborated the reasons by using the Hegelian dialect, which is also a Marxist dialect, of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In 1940 June, presiding over the All India Forward Bloc conference at Nagpur, he made it very clear and declared the All India Forward Bloc as a full-fledged socialist party within the Indian National Congress and gave a clarion call to all power to the Indian people and strategically commented, we should also bear in mind that the Forward Bloc will have a role to play in the post-struggle phase of our history. It will have to build up a new India and happy India on the basis of eternal principles of liberty, democracy and socialism. Subhas Bose observed that no meaningful freedom could be achieved through negotiation. He came out very clearly of what he's been thinking of all along. He wanted all progressive, radical and anti-imperialist elements in the Congress be organized on the basis of a common minimum program and soil prepared for the growth of a Marxist party. Earlier, in a speech delivered on 15 January 1940 at Bankipur Maidan, Patna, Subhash Bose said, "If Hitlerism is crushed, it shall be replaced by communist government. No other government is possible. Communism will be established in the world and imperialism will end. Both cannot exist together. Therefore, by Hitlerism being crushed, the result will be the same as we desire. We want freedom for India. We want India to become free and to let every human being have the same right. At the same time, we want communism to be established throughout the world." Subhash called himself a socialist. He was a leftist from the core of his heart and of a Marxian variety. For him, socialism was not a foreign ideology. He believed that Indian socialism was rooted in ancient India. Addressing the Maharashtra Political Conference at Pune as early as in May 3, 1928, he said, "Communism is not a Western institution. Among the Khasis of Assam, private property as an institution does not exist even in theory. The clan as a whole owns the entire land." Incidentally, let us not forget the fact that it was a communist, Ajay Kumar Ghosh, noted leader of the Communist Party of India, who was among the first who demanded re-election of Bose as Congress president. Ghosh wrote in the party's mouthpiece, the National Front, Bose stood for struggle, for unity in the Congress, for unity between Congress and the workers and the peasants' organizations, for active support to the state's people's movement. Moreover, he, like Nehru, could maintain the unity of the Congress, a unity that was essential for the success of the struggle that loomed ahead. It was the Haripura address of Bose. Eradication of poverty, illiteracy and disease can happen only along socialist lines, which reflected an immediate unity of purpose of both the communists and Bose, the height of Bose communist cooperation in 1938. According to Omiyanath Bose, CPI leader Soli Batliwala was the link between CPI and Subhash Chandra Bose. To make his plans come true, after the All India Anti-Compromise Conference at Ramgarh, Bihar, in March 1940, Netaji consulted his trusted comrades of seeking active help from Communist Russia. Lala Shankarlal, President of Delhi Pradesh Congress Committee and General Secretary of the Forward Bloc, was sent clandestinely to Japan to finalize agreement with the Soviet ambassador there. On his return, Shankarlal conveyed the discussion with the Soviet ambassador to Sharat Chandra Bose, who conveyed it to Netaji, who was then in jail in connection with the removal of the Holwell Monument. To come out from jail and finalize his plans to go to USSR, Netaji started a fast unto death. He was released from prison and put under house arrest. How he then escaped from the Calcutta residence on that January 1941 night is now a well-recorded history.
On the 17th January 1941, at 1:35 a.m., Netaji, in the guise of an upcountry Muslim, Muhammad Ziauddin, tiptoed out of his room, went across the length of his Elgin Road house, and came down the rear staircase where I had parked the car. We drove out of the house in the most natural fashion and took the Grand Trunk Road. On the night of 18th January, we reached Gomo station, where he boarded the Delhi Kalka Mail on his way to Peshawar.
The architects of his final journey to liberate India were the banned and underground communists. Mia Akbar Shah, Acha Singh China and Ram Krishan were sent to arrange for his visit to the USSR. CPI's S.A. Dange in Deoli jail in Rajasthan asked Bhagat Ram Talwar to help Bose cross the border into Afghanistan. However, due to the changing international relationship, the Soviet response was disappointing. He was passed on to the German ambassador, who flew him to Berlin. Subhash Bose's fear of action changed from there on, but his resolve to make India a socialist country remained. In his speech, now as Netaji, to the students at Tokyo in November 1944, he said, India's philosophy should be a synthesis between National Socialism and Communism. Anyone claiming to be a follower of Netaji now must accept his fundamental ideology. In the same month, as the Supreme Commander of the Indian National Army and the President of the Provisional Government of Free India, corresponding with the Soviet ambassador in Tokyo on November 20, 1944, asking for Soviet support, he wrote, "My party, Forward Bloc, consists of the left wing of the national movement in India and stick to the most progressive views on socio-economic problems. Besides, on date, our party is the only party in India which leads an uncompromising struggle against British imperialism in cooperation with few other revolutionary groups." Both Netaji and the communists represented the militant trends in the anti-imperialist struggle, and despite differences, they maintained a mutually cooperative attitude except for brief spells. During the 3 decades of his political life, Netaji Subhash Bose repeatedly expressed his faith in socialism, not of the Fabian or Gandhian type, but of the Marxist variety. He spoke about building a classless society. India being predominantly agrarian, the problem of the peasants would get more importance in his struggle. He said, India should be able to evolve her own methods in keeping with her own need. The synthesis that Subhash talked about can well nigh be assumed to be a new variety of socialism. Neither Lenin nor Mao copied Marxism blindly. They developed Leninism and Mao's thoughts respectively based on Marxian principles according to the history and geography of their respective countries. Subhash too thought in the same lines. He said, in applying any theory to practice, you can never rule out geography or history. This he developed in his thesis Shammobad. Subhash Bose wrote his thesis on Shammobad and had discussed the same with some representatives of the Communist International in Europe, as he desired assistance from the Comintern to work for an armed revolution inside India. He made it clear that he did not wish to be under the control of the Comintern, but they could not come to any agreement. Fortunately, the thesis he wrote on Shammobad has not been found yet. Netaji never called himself a communist, nor a Marxist. Neither did he want to make another communist party. But he did want his Forward Bloc to grow into a Marxist party. He believed in class struggle and wanted to create a classless society. Perhaps for strategic reasons, he confined to characterizing himself as a leftist and as a socialist. But what he was in his heart came out when he passionately spoke his mind. Despite his criticism of some Indian communists and some aspects of communism, in 1930 he wrote to Barindro, "When all shackles are removed, we can proceed to build a new society on the basis of communism." In 1940, when he was already towing the line of shifting to international militant arena, he told the gathering, "We want communism to be established throughout the world." In 1944 and till his last, he believed in communism that gave him strength to tell the young students of Tokyo University in Tokyo itself, India's philosophy should be a synthesis between National Socialism and communism. If this is not his trust in communism, then what else is this? No matter how bitter it may sound to some Netaji admirers, the fact remains a fact. Yes, his immediate target was freedom. His ultimate aim was communism.